I'm joined by a set of people who kind of need no introduction, but I will run through it quickly. I've got Tremaine of No Vacancy In, the amazing Matt Williams of ALYX. I've got Yoon from Ambush, and of course, Edison Chen, who is the reason we're all here, so thanks to Edison.
Don't worry about it. I'm glad you guys are here. Thank you.
Edison, I'm going to go to you first. Just talk to me a little bit, like I talked about collaboration sort of just then, talk to me a little bit about the ethos of this event and sort of what you're trying to achieve.
Well, a lot of times when I'm in China doing interviews, they always ask me, like, what's good, what's this, and it's really hard to explain, there's certain experiences that your words really can't describe, or a lifestyle. It's like, even if you describe it to a T, they can't experience it, So I'm just trying to gather all the things that I see in my life and the best parts of those and bring them all into one place, which is why there's food, there's music, there's fashion, there's us talking. It's just all parts of my life that make my life good. So just trying to give them a sneak peek, and hopefully they can pick up from what they see this weekend and also create and make something dope and cool by themselves.
It's interesting kind of how you talk about, you said there's food, there's music, there's fashion. It feels like the way that all of you work, it's like you don't really differentiate between different disciplines, like this idea of defining yourself as one thing. Like, I guess that's kind of the whole ethos of No Vacancy, is this idea of being, in some ways it's partying, in some ways it's podcasts, in some ways it's design. Just talk to me a little bit about that sort of multidisciplinary focus.
Sorry.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, melting. No, even I would call it more so like, besides multidisciplinary, it's like no labels. So my whole thing, and I know A-side as well, is just like once you start putting labels, that's when you start limiting. So right now, we do the podcast, we DJ, we do talks, we make teas, but maybe we'll be doing horticulture in 15 years. I don't know. So with no label, then it's bouncing back to what Edison said, just really, the only label is No Vacancy In, and that's what we filter our lives through, and then everything else is just kind of in the moment. So that's our practice of it. It's like really like staying in the moment and no labels and working out all right.
Matt, you were nodding to a lot of that. Is that kind of your ethos with ALYX as well? Because obviously you work so closely with Nick Knight on the films. There's lots of different angles to sort of what you're doing.
Yeah. I think that's a really exciting thing about fashion, just as, a creative outlet in general, is there's no barriers. If you want to build a house, you just do it. If you want to, start a homeware line, you just do it. And it's generally, accepted by your supporters, where even in fields like art, there's such a structure in place that you have to work within to be successful in that arena, to protect the value of your work and the perceived value and the provenance of the people that collect it. So I think that's what's really beautiful about fashion, is if you feel like, working in music and doing whatever you want, it's really, really free. It's really free. No rules.
Yoon, give me your perspective on that, because it's interesting with Ambush, the kind of journey from music into jewelry, into sort of graphic design, encompassing fashion. Again, it's this kind of very sort of wide open gaze, and you've been allowed to sort of develop in new ways as things have moved forward, kind of in part because of the relationships that you've built and the collaborations that you've had. It's a big question.
Well, it's kind of like extension of ourselves in a way. Nothing's like premeditated or calculated. It's like in the process of doing something, we realize that we need something, and then we have ideas, so why don't we just put it together ourselves? And I think that led to become what Ambush is today. And like I said, the music was Verbal's job, and in the middle of doing the music and learning about the process of self-promotion and putting everything together, we realized the artists need clothes and jewelries, and we just couldn't find what we wanted, so we just put it together as we wanted. From there, just other thing, it gave birth to different things. So, it's just basically, it's kind of like realizing our ideas and dreams in a way. So it's nothing, and also like, we didn't study fashion, so we don't look at it like that's something that we're going to build career upon. It's just meeting our needs. There's just, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of creative needs, and we're trying to meet it, and then like make that happen as we live. And I think that's going to give birth to different things, and we'll do it. So I think it's important to keep things organic as well. I think when you keep it really open and organic, that will give like new things to the platform.
Do the rest of you kind of agree with that ethos of like you're making something based on like what you and your friends want, and then you're almost inviting people into that world? Is that how you all approach stuff?
Yeah, because it's all. So all the stuff we do goes back to early tribal structures of humanity. So, you know, it's like, how do you make things for your tribe that helps the tribe? And also, how do you court people in your tribe, whether it be like opposite sex or same sex or whatever, just court someone to be a friend or a lover or whatever, because you want to wear something or impress them, but only someone that's in your circle of influence. And it all started from human tribal societies, and then obviously post, you know, agricultural and industrial revolution happened, and then human societies became much bigger, and so the tribe, we try to recreate tribes within a very big society, and that's how you used to have subcultures, were just tribes, and now that there's the internet, that dissolves subcultures, and now it's not so tribal, but still, that's like, I feel like everyone on this panel and a good group of people who are still trying to recreate that, still trying to help and impress the tribe. So yeah, that's what I think.
Edison, do you think of it in terms of a tribe? Like, do you want to think of it in terms of everyone coming here as someone who like identifies with something like socially, or like in terms of their morals, how they see themselves as a person?
Yeah, I think, you know, with the introduction of money, a lot of things kind of got changed, you know. Like, I think, like, coming on to what Tremaine was saying was, what do I do that's good, and what do the people around me do that's good, you know? So I'm not going to lie and say I'm good at everything, and I have to admit my strengths and my weaknesses. So that's what I think that, you know, in a collaboration, everything is almost a collaboration nowadays, you know? I'm not talking about like a product. I'm talking about us talking right now is a collaboration, you know? It's just that being able to express that some of my creative ideas mixed with some of these people here, we can create something that's even better than either one of us alone doing it. And like going back to like about this money thing, is just like, in a perfect world, it would be like, I make good rice, and then you got the good water, and it's like, here, we're going to change it, you know? And then everything was good, you know? So I think on that level, when we work together with each other, it's not about monetary. It's about creation of something that we all believe in. And I think that that's the most important part, because a lot of the kids right now, they look at brands and they think that we're like, you know, really luxury, or we're living a certain type of lifestyle, and they're like, oh, you guys always collaborate with each other. It's because we're friends. It's not because, oh, I want to take something from this company. It's like Yoon was saying, it's organically grown. Like I've spent years building relationships with these people, and like me and Tremaine still haven't worked on anything, but I'm pretty sure that we will one day, you know. And it's like, it's organic. It's not something forced. So I think it's pretty much like a tribe, and it's like we have a great group of people that support each other, I think, you know.
It's interesting there, though, because you talked about the way that young people look at brands, and I feel like increasingly brands operate as publishers as well. You know, they're putting out constant stream of information. They're accessible through all these different points. And I'm interested, do you all feel that kind of responsibility that you have when you have a voice, even if it is through sort of product, to also educate and to reach out to people and to provide some sort of like sense of right and wrong, because you're aware of the following that you have amongst people who are really young? Is that something you're looking kind of stressed by that idea, or is that something that you do?
I mean, yeah, I think I think it's important to design responsibly in the way that it's our job to educate, you know, the future customers, the future creatives. All of us were customers once, and we looked up to brands, and we were educated by them, and then emulated what our belief system was based on the brands that, you know, that we really loved. And that wouldn't have been possible without, you know, them being explicit about their process and their values. And I think, you know, at least for me, it's important to just put things out in the world that kind of have the right, in my opinion, to exist. You know what I mean? Not to trick the customer into buying more stuff or that this will make your life better, but more just strictly from a design standpoint that it has the right to exist. Because I think there's a lot of big companies out there that don't really think that the person that they're selling to is intelligent. And that's absolutely not true. And what's great about the internet now is that every kid can just learn about everything that they want to. And I think in the future, you know, just making really cheap crap for kids to buy isn't going to fly, you know, and charge a lot for it. That's not cool, you know. Something that's made inexpensive and deserves to be inexpensive should be, you know. And then something that's made really well, you know, it deserves to be expensive because people are being paid the right amount of money to make that. You know, it's being made ethically with the environment. And if it's a good design, it should stay cool throughout the hype. You know what I mean? So that's my view on it. I think we all have a responsibility to have future generations kind of make things in that way. You know what I mean?
You're nodding. Do you agree? Yeah.
Well, if I can add something else to, I guess, like the word branding.
Yeah.
I think a lot of younger generation don't realize, like, I mean, we had this conversation, me and Tremaine, the other day, but, as, you know, like, I don't know, I think the reality TV kind of ruined it for most of us. So they don't really see what goes between 1 to 10 and how much work that goes into building something and making something into an item, or like it could be clothes, it could be jewelry, whatnot, but you know, the fashion business is not an easy thing, and it does take a lot of work. So I think a lot of times, when people look at it from the outside, they just think like, you know, they quickly to think, oh, like by putting something together, it's gonna be branding. But I mean, I think for a lot of us too, it's still like work in progress, isn't it? Like, well, the more we do it, we realize like we want to become more of this, and we grow and grow. So if I can give advice to the younger people who are starting the brand, I guess it's just, first, I think it's important to like really look into what you want to say instead of like how you should be or how they should be, because basing upon what the media is selling you in a way. So yeah, it's good to kind of just invest in yourself. So so your message has become much more clear. And we don't have to have all the answers. I think sometimes you just work really hard, then you see the process and what you want to say in the process of it.
It's interesting that you talked about that long process and the work that goes on behind the scenes, because I read an interview that you did recently, and you talked about, it's kind of you're talking about being a female designer, and you said how people always focus on the fact that you're like groomed and you turn up and you're always like, you're wearing your lipstick and you've got your clothes on, you're looking great, and people therefore presume that you don't do any work and they think that you're just like the face of it. Just like tell me a bit about that, because I think it's an interesting pressure, and I thought you articulated it really well.
I mean, personally, I just like to look good if I'm working, because it's a mental thing. Like, it's just the vibe that I'm putting out. So even if I don't sleep, if I'm tired and miserable, I'm not going to bring that energy into the office. So I make sure I put on that so that our workers and everybody feel, motivated and like, they feel good about it. But I think definitely being a female, like, we do often get judged by our looks first, more than how much work we put into it. And that's just how the society is, and me getting mad is not going to change it. But I think in overtime, I just have to do my work, do good work so they can deny it. And I think in time, it's not just me, but it's going to take a lot of other females. And then the collective will change it, hopefully, soon.
Edison, you're kind of nodding to that, and I think it is interesting, this problem of perception. Like, people want the lifestyle, but they aren't aware of the amount of work that goes behind something. Like, everyone wants to have a brand, but they don't understand, the amount of design meetings that entails, the amount of, like, travel, factory visits. Like, is that something that you've encountered, this, like,
Well, honestly, like there's a lot of crazy work that goes, I'm sure, for all of us on this panel, but it's hard, and sometimes it's like you get real tired. But because we're doing a job that we love, it's not really that kind of like painful. You know what I mean? Because we wake up and we're doing what we want to do. Like this is a path that we've chose, not that's been chosen for us. And once you find your own path, like no matter how hard it is, it will always be fine because this is your belief. Like you could go do something else, make a little bit more money or make less money and have a easier life, but that's not what we want. And out of our lives, we want to represent something. We want to be remembered for something. We want to give back something to the world, right? So that's why even though the journey is hard and it's all good because the moments that we do get our success or get reckoned with, it's priceless. And I think that, there's a lot of glam and a lot of cosmetic stuff that goes on in our worlds, but that's just a part of the job, I think there's the good and the bad with everything, but I think I'm pretty confident to say that all four of us, we're really happy, I think. We're living our dreams, and that's the most important thing,
I want to ask, sorry, are you going to say something, Matt?
No, I was just going to say, back to that point of collaboration, I think maybe a lot of people don't realize that in making clothing and making work, it's a collaboration with the suppliers that we work with the stores that we work with the photographer. I think it's just an extension of collaborating with each other is actually the main central focus of being a designer and a creative is collaboration. I think without the strength of everybody that supports our ideas, it's not possible. So it's definitely not an individual sport. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, to add to that point, I mean, that's the most, again, that's just what the best comes out of people, humans, is collaborating, and like me personally, I wouldn't be where I was at without A-Side. Impossible. And kids might send me a DM and stuff. I appreciate the attention, but I literally don't say much more than find your A-Side, which means don't look up to us. Look around you, and find your contemporary. It doesn't involve age or sex or gender, but find your contemporaries so you guys can have your zeitgeist moment together. And then it goes into what Yoon said about what kind of ruined things is reality TV, which went into social media. So it has people either looking at a screen literally more than they're looking at each other and paying attention to each other. So then it's and I use myself just not to put down anyone else. So kids are looking at No Vacancy In, look who they're around, look what they do. And there's the real celebrities should be your contemporaries. Because those are always my, A-Side and my friends who you'll never know, bartender at Corner Bistro. Those are my celebrities because those are people that inspire me because they're around me, they know me, they care about me, and they educate me about life. And when people's celebrities are only on Instagram and movies and sports athletes, it's a slippery slope, and it all goes into the education of knowing, what, again, goes to Edison said about consumerism and money. You got to understand, the reason why all this stuff is projected is to make more money. It's not for you. So obviously, I need money to live to a certain extent, but understand these things that are being projected to you are for you to consume, where the people around you, they're projecting things to you so you can live. So you got to focus more on that. And if you do focus on the internet and whatever stuff, don't look up to it. Learn how to manipulate it for good, and then, maybe the world can get better. So that's what I do. I'm not going to be oh, I'm not using Instagram. I'm just going to harness it. So I'm okay, kids, pay attention to me. Well, I'm going to talk about women's rights, gay rights, stuff that happens within, I don't know, the pictures of me and Virgil turning up. So that's I just do a Trojan horse and put the medicine in the food. And I think we all do that to the extent, even Matt sitting up here talking about, very important, talking about, this leather bomber costs $2.5 grand because I'm paying this person appropriately that puts it together. You know, or the ambush jewelry, this one's $5 grand because we gave this person a wage they can helps them raise their family and kids. So it's good for like, you know, kids or adults who are interested in stuff to know that. You know, or like, oh, denim tears and Brendan Fowler tee is $65 because we use 100% recycled cotton, which looks great, feels better, and most importantly, it's good for the environment. So, knowing all that stuff. And again, that's only stuff you only get from your contemporaries. You don't get it off looking at me on Instagram. So, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that point about like educating, like while you're also like making work. And I think it's interesting how you talk about that sense of responsibility. But I wonder, and it's kind of a question for all of you, like how do you get those messages across when we're living in this very, very fast sort of like image-consuming society where people are flicking through Instagram constantly. They don't take time to look at things. They buy something because of the logo. They like something because of the name. Like, how do you get that deeper element through?
Oh, go ahead, man.
I don't know. I think you just have to live and lead by example and then just be an inspirational person, right? I mean, one of my favorite brands is Patagonia. And when reading his biography, it was like when he could have sold his brand for like $500 million, but didn't, just so it could be a prototype for future brands to emulate, you know, of how they treat their staff, how they make clothing. I mean, they have a book that's a checklist that goes even down to like how cleaning supplies should be stored separate from food storage, and double pane windows to have save heat and less energy use. Like, and I think we can all, if you think about like, oh, what does success mean? For me, it can only be to be a prototype for future brands to come up and just be stronger. You know what I mean? Like, what are you really doing if you're not training, inspiring, leading by example for people to just do it better than you? You know, that's kind of it. That's what you have to do, lead by example and be inspiring.
Do you agree with that, Edison? Do you feel, because that's kind of what, again, bring it back to this, it's like you're showcasing work of others, you're kind of bringing them into your world, you're helping to sort of give them a showcase.
Yeah, no, I think one of the two main things that strikes me about this conversation is that a lot of the kids nowadays, I'm not saying that they're good or they're bad, but they say they know. I know, and then I ask them, how do you know? They're like, oh, I saw it on the internet. And it's like, that only gives you half of the truth, you know? Like, there's these kids that are really, really young. They say they know, like, early day Takahiro Miyashita, right? And I'm like, how do you know that? Because, like, that's when I was a teenager. And they're like, I saw it on the internet. I was like, you have to go to Japan. You have to go and see this. You have to see it, that you don't know. And it's okay to not know, because if you don't know, and if you're like, hey, do you know this and this? And you're like, oh yeah, I know, but you actually don't know. You're robbing yourself of information, because the exchange of information, which is a collaboration, is the most important part of my life. Because in sitting and having conversations with people, we might be talking about something totally different, but it might inspire me in a way to think of how I should do the interior for a restaurant, or how to design the next collection and stuff like that. So I feel like, the most important thing is going and being able to see it and feel it and live it and smell it. So that's why, a lot of retailers, brands and stuff, why a store means so much to a brand is because you could be hanging on a nice rack in a department store, but it doesn't bleed and smell what you want to tell them. So when you have a store, it's almost like when someone walks in, I immediately know, okay, the jewelry looks like this, but when I walked into the ambush store, I was like, okay, I fully get the aesthetic and I understand exactly the mood of this company now, And I think that it goes back to not just trying to say, oh, I saw something on the internet. Internet is a great source of information to sample, but to actually really go and feel it and vibe with it. That's the most important part. And that's why I did INNERSECT, is because a lot of these people in China, they can't get a visa to go certain places. So they're always like, oh, yeah, I saw you go here. I wish I could go there. And hopefully over the next few years when we do INNERSECT, like, they can come and they can live it and they can see it, and then they can get inspired by it, and then they can create something amazing. Because I think all of us, we love our jobs, but in the end of the day, we want to inspire people to do amazing things, and then maybe one day we can work with them and collaborate with them. That's the most important part, I think.
And it's interesting also this idea of like, you're talking about kind of experiencing rather than just consuming. Like this idea that you actually have to go and live something, which is kind of interesting because all of you kind of engage with like physical stuff, whether it's events or parties or stores. It's this idea that it's never enough just to sell something. And it's curious to me that you all share that. Like, and where does that come from?
For me, that comes from my family. You know, it probably started with my grandfather because my family's from a small town called Harlem, Georgia. It's like 1,500 people, one red light town. And my grandfather would drive from Harlem, Georgia to the Bronx to go see Yankees games. So I think he was like the trailblazer in my family that was like about experiencing things, and that, well, just because you're in Harlem, Georgia, you have to get out. And I definitely think that inspired my mom and dad when they turned 18 to not work at like not knocking anyone that works there, would not work at the pecan factory and get out of Harlem, Georgia. So me hearing those stories and then seeing my dad travel loads, and, you know, my parents taking me to the city every weekend, and because we lived in Flushing, Queens, and we moved to Jamaica, Queens, which was a really rough neighborhood. But then my weekends, I'd be like, we go to Central Park and see Pavarotti with the Harlem Boys Choir, or we go to MoMA, we go to PS1 in Long Island City, all these things. So, and then I started to see like how my life differentiated from the other young men I was growing up with, and I realized it wasn't like, oh, I'm better than them. I've had more experiences than them. So that's why I'm living maybe a safer or more positive life. I don't live a perfect life, but that's where I learned that. So then I tried to recreate, and try to recreate what my parents did, and be around people who recreate that, you know. So in whichever way, you know, and whether it's the way ASAP Mob is a family, I'll be okay. I like this, reminds me of something, or the way Ambush is, or so on and so forth, or the way Edison's bringing everyone together to come to Shanghai, you know, making it really accessible for us too. He's not just making it accessible for the people of Shanghai, he's making it accessible for us to come here and see something, you know, we normally wouldn't see. So, which makes your life better, you know. So that's my whole thing, experiences, and then that goes into the work. So I'm like, okay, well, what kind of experience can I give through a T-shirt? What kind of experience can me and Asa give through a DJ set? So then you get out of how do I sell something to someone, how do you make someone experience something? And then obviously a consequence of that is them buying a part of the experience because it costs you to make the experience. And if it doesn't cost you anything to make the experience, you don't charge them. So yeah, I think that's like the line for me.
Yoon, give me a bit of your backstory in terms of because I think Ambush was such a pioneer for this kind of way of working, and just talk to me about, you know, we had a little like backstory from Tremaine. Give me your version.
Of like how,
like where the ethos came from to kind of work across all these different ways. Yoon's one of my favorite people because you actually think about what you're going to say, which I love. It's so cool.
I'm trying to focus. The music's so loud, like it's kind of distracting.
Yeah, I apologize.
Yeah, so I'm just like zoning in.
Sorry.
You know, like, no one really taught us how to do anything. So, in a way, like, a lot of things that became, like, part of who we are, like me and Verbal, for some reason, we're always put in a situation where, like, things weren't advantage for us. So, like, you know, instead of just kind of giving up, we're kind of like fighters, right? So, like, if we have an idea, we'll just find a way to make it happen for us, because we just want to. We just want to express, and we want to do it our way. And I think it just comes from that like innate hunger, and also just believing like DIY spirit of just like, you know, making sure we do it our way and we do it ourselves. And there's always to find the way to do it, and if you look for it, you can always find a way to do it, you know?
It's interesting that you said that, you know, you kind of implied that you can't teach that. Like, you know, there isn't a school where you could have learned that. And I think it's kind of interesting, again, it kind of applies to all of you, particularly thinking in terms of fashion. Like, fashion is actually really conservative as an industry and doesn't really embrace this idea of working across lots of different things. Like, you're a designer or you're a stylist, and like you go to fashion school and you study design or you study styling. Like, there's nowhere where you can learn this. And I'm just
Kanye West school. Donda.
elaborate a little bit about that.
I mean, look at everybody that's come out of working with him.
Even Yoon, the first time Yoon and Verbal, first time I ever seen them was on his blog.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of things I saw for the first time were on that blog. That blog he did a long time ago that I used to like read, check every lunch break. You know what I mean? See if he put something, him and his team put something new, you know?
I mean, that's where I learned. You know, that's where Virgil learned. That's like, yeah. I think that's the difference. I mean, I had a lot of insecurities actually when I started doing clothing, that I didn't go to St. Martin's or Parsons, and, you know, I actually applied and didn't get in.
People can be really critical as well.
Yeah.
And like, you know, stay in your box, you do this, you don't do that. Like.
And then, you know, I actually hired some design team members for ALYX that like went to those schools or worked at Celine or wherever, and it gave me a lot of confidence that they were no different than me, you know what I mean? And what I learned from speaking with them was like St. Martin's teaches you about the real world, that you have to go figure it out yourself. And I think that's what I had in working with Ye, was like, just like figure it out at all costs, and it was just constant movement, constant problem solving, and then I've just applied that into work. But it's a problem, I think, also for fashion schools, is that they're not teaching how to think about fashion as like a complete model. Nobody's like saying, this is a new way to do a brand. Like, we're going to have it be a subscription service, and people are going to, you know, there's a cool brand that came out called Lot. It's like from a Russian tech millionaire, and basically you pay $9 a month or $30 a month, and they give you an item of clothing each month, depending on how long it's going to last you. So like, you get a pair of underwear and socks every month, a tee every other month, a hoodie every 6 months, a hat once a year, a pair of shoes every 6 months. And then when you're done with it, you send it back, and you get new stuff. And it's to basically eliminate clutter in your home.
Wow.
And have like, you know, a cleaner mind. And like, that's coming from, you know, tech and applying it to fashion. But we're still, you know, teaching our future designers how to just think so linear, like, okay, we're just going to think about making beautiful clothes. But a designer can't sit and just like design a collection in a cave for 6 months and then present it to the world and it's just successful. Now all these things are all connected, you know, every single thing, and you have to take it all into account, and then it becomes a brand. And there needs to be more of that teaching at school.
You guys need to start a school, all of you.
Even for me, a very important person was Robert Duffy, who I'm pretty sure, you know, people on this panel might or might not be familiar with, but he's Marc Jacobs' business partner. He's worked with Marc since '85, and Robert personally hired me. And throughout time, there's these figures, the Robert Duffy, Andy Warhol, Kanye West. They're all very similar guys who enlisted people to do something, and then they push you to see what you can do other than what you thought you were there for. And those are the best kind of bosses and people to work with, you know? And that's what, you know, Robert did with me and so many other people, you know? Like, yeah, I got to shout him out. I always shout out loads of people. Robert Duffy, very instrumental in my life. Taught me that I can do anything, you know? And people I didn't know, Andy Warhol, you know, I recommend everyone to read the book Holy Terror which is written by Bob Colacello, who was his like editor-in-chief of Interview and like his right-hand man, you know, from the time, like a little bit after he got shot. And, you know, another person where Bob probably wouldn't be where his life if he didn't work with Andy and saw Andy produce records, make films, do this, do that, piss on paintings, whatever, you know, all this stuff with no label, you know, and all these figures create a version of that factory. And I think all of us here are endeavoring to create our own Warhol factory in our brands and our lives, you know, and where we can push people to do things that maybe they didn't think they could do, and push ourselves to do things we couldn't do, and give people experiences that maybe they didn't think they could have. So, yeah.
But also, we should talk about Nick Knight and his school.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the amount of great photographers and image makers that have like assisted him, like Ruth, Craig McDean, Solvay, you know, SHOWstudio. That's the purpose for showing the process, you know, and you know, inspiring people to understand how to do it themselves. And Nick is so giving, you know, I owe half of where I'm at to him and half, you know, to Kanye. Like that was my school, Nick Knight.
Exactly.
And Kanye.
Like even I told Peter Saville last week in Paris, we all were together, and I said, I watched that interview that you and him did, you know, thank you for that so much, because, so do I need to go do graphic design at Central St. Martin? It won't hurt. I'm all for formal education, but you can watch that interview and learn a lot from that interview, that 2-hour interview. You can watch Matt's SHOWstudio interview. You know, if you just like feel like you lost in life and you hear his story from how he started out to how he got to here, you know, reading is education, and it's reading a book inside the walls of Yale and reading the book in your local library. It's the same fucking book. The Yale and Central St. Martin is the placebo that makes you feel the book's more than it is. The book's already got it. You know, Central St. Martin, Yale, they're not publishing their own books. They're getting people that know the books to come in and talk and tell you stuff from the books, and really tell you how to create your own story. So, you know, like I said, you know, you're like, you guys create your own school. It's like, yeah, but it's like the school is life. You know, if you acknowledge that, then your life would be a bit more fulfilling than if you don't, and you're like, well, I didn't go to this institution. It's like, you're blessed if you go to Central St. Martin. Extra blessed if you got to work with Louise. But if you didn't, you still can find that knowledge somewhere else, you know? Even if it's just reading an article for her, or find someone that worked for her and work for them, you know?
It goes back to what Edison said right at the start about this idea of actually getting out and doing stuff and trying to find out more information. And like, I mean, I'm feeling very inspired. I want you to like give me a morning pep talk every morning, because it's pretty good. But like, I'm conscious of time. So just like, on that note of everything, like Edison, just give us like something to kind of like wrap up in terms of how you see this moving forward, because this is something that obviously like this way of working, bringing people together, inviting not just your friends but a broader audience in. Is that something, you know, we talked about the importance of that in terms of, because there isn't that availability in traditional education, like what's next?
No, yeah, like I think, you know, like going back to like going on the spaces is like, gathering people can be a barbecue, and it's supposed to lead to a happy emotion. You know what I mean? So I think all of us, we're trying to bring people emotions, and we're trying to give them feelings, and hopefully it's positive feelings, you know? So that's why we're getting people together, either us as family here in Shanghai or getting them to come and see us. It's all trying to incite emotions. But there is no rule to emotions. There's no 1 + 1 = 2. You know, it could be 1 + 1 = 4 with emotions. You know what I mean? So what I think is most important, especially for the kids in China, is that education is obviously key, but education also teaches you that there's a box. And if you can think outside the box, I'm not saying break the box. I'm saying understand that it's a system, and the system that they're putting you in is the system that's being put out by everyone. And you're not everyone. You're you. So you have to understand the system and how you fit into that, and what else you can break through for it. Because if it's the same thing that you're going to be doing that is taught in school, it's already been done, and it's uninspiring, and no one wants to see that because everybody's seen it. So just think outside the box and just believe in yourself and believe in your ideas and stick to it. I think that's what I always tell these people in China, and it's just I think a lot of examples are sitting out here on this panel with you, and if you look around, hopefully it excites you, and I think every day, hopefully we can bring people to happier emotions. I think that's really the key of what we do. Like we do photo shoots, we have dinners, we have gatherings, we have one-on-one talks, and it's all about the emotion, and I think that's the most important part of what we do, I think.
I think that's a really great note to end on. I feel incredibly inspired. I want to go start a brand, run the world. Pretty good. If everyone can join me in thanking our panelists with a big round of applause.
Thank you.